Dr. Jayantan is an alumnus of Aravind Eye Hospital and the director of KS Hospital at E Road. He is an excellent teacher and he is also trained in refractive laser and refractive surgery at NN Bangalore.
So is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, sir.
I would like to thank Ramesh Dorajan sir for this wonderful opportunity and especially for sharing his wonderful videos to be presented today in my talk. Thank you so much, sir. So my talk will be on a toric in special situations. So when I say special situations, in context of a toric well, you will either have an issue with calculation or you have an issue with an implantation. So to start with, the issues in calculation could be either at a keratometry, axial length, or IOL calculation point. So the first one is the keratometry. So most of the time we do an automated measurement, and with the automated measurements, the acquisition is going to be static. You have no appreciation of the accuracy of the measurement. Most of the time it's a printout that comes to us and we see the value and implant an IOL, but we need to validate the measurement before we implant the IOL. So for instance, if you are an instrument operator, as you can see in the first image, the image is very clear and the keratometry values are absolutely repeatable. If you're not an instrument operator, then also after the image is taken, you can go back and check for the image quality and the standard deviation, which is going to be the hallmark of residing a toric well. Right? If the Myers are not crisp and clean, the validity of all the other measurements are going to be diminished in a toric well. So the key here in IOL calculation is the tear film. So when you have a tear film abnormality, it is completely evident in the image, and also the repeatability is going to be poor. As I said, even if you're not an instrument operator, once the image is done, you can go back and check for the image quality and the standard deviation, which is not going to be very good. So completely try to avoid jumping into the calculation of these cases. So in the ocular surface disorder, the dry eye, which is most common, presents with all these one. The first one is a manual keratometry value, where you can see the abnormal Meyer, which could not be even aligned. The second one is the lens star image. The image quality is not good. There is increased tear film height. The third one is from the IOL master, the typical tail trail sign, the smudging of the images are seen. The last one is because of dry eye, the patient has got a photophobia and trying to squeeze the eyes. And as you could see, the lid is covering half of the Myers. So the image is being partially taken. So these values are not going to be clear. So an irregular and an unstable tear film will affect the biometric measurement for IOL calculation. The need for ocular surface optimization must be identified and addressed before the measurements were performed for IOL calculation and planning. Right. These are the red flag during the keratometry. We'll just keep it off. The second scenario would be the IOL power calculation. If you know, the toric IOLs are labeled with the cylinder power calculated at the IOL plane. What we calculate is the cylinder power of the corneal plane, and the calculators will give a cylinder power calculated at the IOL plane. This will always be higher than the cylinders calculated at the corneal plane. But this cannot be a fixed ratio. For example, in an eye with a deep postoperative anterior chamber, such as a myopic eye, the given toric IOL will correct a lower amount of corneal cylinder than if it is placed in the normal anterior chamber depth. So the ratio has to be slightly higher than expected. It should be 1.86. The converse happens in a shallow anterior chamber depth, where such as in cases like a hyperopia, the same IOL will correct a higher amount of corneal cylinder than expected. So the ratio has to be 1.29. As been told by Jack Holliday, almost 73% of our eyes are just at the normal range, and rest 26% are falling into a range where it could be an axial myopia, hyperopia, microcornea, megalocornea, or nanophthalma. So we need to be very careful when you are calculating this. So remember, it is not accurate to use a single ratio, that is 1.46, to convert an IOL cylinder into a corneal cylinder, as was done in some of the IOL power calculators. So the next scenario is this patient presented to us for a routine cataract surgery, and the corneal value showed just over a 3/4 diopter, and multifocal IOL was implanted. Patient was not happy because the cylinder was still present even post-operatively. So for the other eye, the patient was counseled, and he had the same just over 3/4 of diopter astigmatism. But to our surprise, this patient accepted a T30 model in the pan-toric IOL. And after implantation, the patient was 6'6" and N6. So with this idea, we thought of doing it for another patient who also had a 3/4 diopter, but this patient was not accepting the toric. The reason is the posterior corneal astigmatism. The average power of posterior condylar astigmatism is approximately 0.5 diopter. This is not a fixed value, but rather proportional to the amount of anterior corneal astigmatism. The corneal astigmatism calculated with the keratometric index, that is the keratometric astigmatism, neglects information about the posterior corneal astigmatism. It tends to overestimate total corneal astigmatism in eyes with rule and underestimate in eyes with against rule. This has happened in the previous case where the first patient was accepting a toric because it was against rule, and second patient was not accepting because it wasn't with the rule astigmatism. So not just the magnitude, also the type of astigmatism matters when it comes to the toric IOL. So the important step to improve toric IOL outcome is to rely on the total corneal astigmatism rather than the keratometric astigmatism. Coming to the irregular corneas, the keratoconus, the first of it, the issues with the keratoconus is that the keratometry is going to be inconsistent, especially when you're going to calculate with different measure instrument. The measurement is going to be completely different and will be less repeatable because of the irregular astigmatism that is present, and because of the steepness of the cornea, the ACD calculation is going to be unusual, and that will lead to error in the ELP and error in IOL calculation. The visual axis may not be always on the apex. It could be on the slope of a cone. We need to remember that. And the keratoconus will create a negative spherical aberration, for which we need to implant a truly aspheric IOL or a slightly positive spherical aberration IOLs. This is a 42-year-old female with a dense nuclear sclerosis in the left eye with a vision of 660, present for routine cataract surgery. She had 2 diopters of astigmatism, but the axis was irregular. So this prompted us to do a topography, and the patient had a keratoconus. So EKR values are almost normal from 3 to 4.5 mm zone. So it was repeatable and the value seems to be fairly good. So we implanted a toric IOL and the patient had a 20/30 postoperative uncorrected visual acuity. So when it comes to toric IOL and keratoconus, the toric IOL was indicated in mild to moderate non-progressive keratoconus with adequately regular astigmatism in the central 4 mm of the cornea. It is okay to do a toric IOL in a severe keratoconus with a slight irregularity, but you cannot assure the results for the patient. But the patient can be independent of glasses. They can be less dependent on the glasses postoperatively, but care should be taken to select the right IOL at this point. So use a K value from the topography, axial length from the optical biometer, and preferable to use a SRKT or a Barrett universal formula has been highlighted by Ramesh Doraisen sir. The second case would be a post-PKP. This is a 30-year-old male patient, post-PKP status in both eyes with a clear graft. The right eye, he had a dense PCC and a vision of 360. So the manual keratometry value showed a 47.5 at 180 and 54 at 90. So topography was done. All the sutures was removed and the patient's topography was stable for quite some time. And this is the topography right now. And the EKR value showed fairly repeatable values. So the magnitude of astigmatism was taken from the EKR and the manual keratometry. Axis was calculated from the topography and the manual keratometry. So the values are inputted and the customized IOL was implanted. As you can see here, the model was T8 and the IOL power was 13.5. We expected to have a slight myopic shift post-operatively. We don't want the patient to have hematopia. So as expected, the patient had a good visual acuity with a 0.75 sphere and a 0.75 cylinder post-operatively, improving to 6.9. The PKO, the point to remember here is remove all the sutures, wait for the topographic stability, consider multiple measurements, and a regularity in the central 4 millimeters of the cornea decides the outcome in the patients. Right. So the last of it is the issues with implantation. I just have 2 minutes to go. A stable IOL bag complex is a prerequisite for the rotational stability of the toric IOL. So this is a case where there was a PC dehiscence. So whenever there is a PC dehiscence, if it is small, try to convert that into a posterior capsular rhexis. A posterior capsular rhexis is a must because with the dehiscence, you are trying to implant the IOL and rotate it to the intended axis. There could be an extension of the tear. So once you convert it into a posterior capsular rhexis, the extension is completely avoided. So once the rhexis is completed, if there is a rhexis is good, you can go implant the toric IOL. And the key here is always make sure the wound is completely hydrated in the procedure. Disco is completely aspirated. Make sure there is no vitreous stand. Even a small vitreous stand to the anterior chamber can tilt the IOL and compromise the outcome of the toric IOLs. The last point is the cases where you have a zonular dehiscence. A zonular dehiscence of less than 3 clock hours, you can implant a capsular tension ring. And more than 3 clock hours, never try to implant a capsular tension ring in case of a toric IOL. Go for a Sione ring. But when it comes to scenaring, the point is like you need to extend the wound a slightly bit, which can actually induce a little bit of astigmatism, but it will be better than implanting a non-toric IOL. So to reduce the chance of cutting the conjunctiva, to spare the conjunctiva, reverse corneal pockets are being done. There's no need for a glue also in a Hoffman's pocket. So the key point to remember here is when you're docking the needle, make sure the PC is not ruptured, because with the dialysis and the open capsule, IOL, placing a toric IOL will definitely not be possible. So once the once the needle is docked, the IOL is buried under the Hoffman's pocket. And once it is buried, once the bag is stabilized, you can go ahead and implant the toric IOL now. The points to remember here is that make sure the bag is completely stable before you implant the IOL. And after removing the hooks, hydrate all the wounds, make sure the wound doesn't leak, and then there's a collapse of the anterior chamber immediate postoperatively, because the toric IOL is going to rotate. Okay, so understanding the signs of astigmatism, adapting the newer technologies, and improvising the surgeon skill will definitely make sure the toric IOL outcomes are much better in even a special situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jayantan, for a very nice, exhaustive, but very clear understanding of the complexities involved in some of these troublesome situations. Thanks, Dr.